Hello, this is Mingo with the Medical Marijuana News Update. Last summer we introduced you to Jean Marlowe from Polk County, North Carolina. Jean brings unique credentials to her struggle with the federal government over her right to use whole natural cannabis to control her debilitating pain.
In 1986, I fell at work and crushed my left knee and had a lot of muscle and nerve damage. I had to have surgery to remove part of a cartilage and all this. And ever since I was a little bitty kid, I couldn't take pills very well. I'd throw up, and even one-a-day vitamins, I would throw up. They started me on a regimen of pain and muscle relaxing medicines due to the problems, and within 9 months I had developed a liver problem. My eyes had turned yellow.
Not until September of 1998 would Jean know the reason for all her suffering when a doctor from Asheville, North Carolina, Louis Bissell, correctly diagnosed her various conditions as stemming from an inherited liver disorder.
Jean is 47 years old, I think, at this point, and for several years has had an unusual condition that was diagnosed and with several other diagnoses, including rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis. She has had back problems and degenerative osteoarthritis, and it turns out that all of these are manifestations of a condition known as porphyria. Porphyria is a disorder of the heme, H-E-M-E, the hemoglobin metabolism, which is the process where hemoglobin is broken down and then recycled in the liver, spleen, and lymph organs to form red blood cells and white blood cells again. The disorder of porphyria is a manifestation of one or two of these enzymes that don't function in this breakdown and recycling of the heme molecules in the hemoglobin. This has multiple ramifications as far as its impact on the physiology and the pathology of the body. Abdominal distress is a very common symptom which she has had for years. Muscle spasms, low back pain, multiple joint symptoms are part of this disorder.
That's about the time that a nurse from the VA told me that I should try marijuana, that they had had tremendous amount of success with it in the VA hospitals with soldiers who were, and veterans who were suffering with spasticity disorder. So the next muscle spasm I had, my husband had went and gotten me some, and he rolled me a marijuana cigarette, and within 5 minutes, the muscle spasm stopped. Within 10 minutes, my stomach stopped shaking for the first time in over 5 years.
The other very important thing is that it does relieve muscle spasm, and it seems to clearly have an effect on smooth muscle with a relaxation of smooth muscle. And my feeling is that there certainly in this disorder there may be vascular spasm, in other words, vasospasm of the blood vessels, and it certainly appears to me that the cannabis may relieve this spasm as well as increase and improve what I call microcirculation or capillary circulation, perhaps in many areas of the body, including the brain, including the muscles, including probably in the liver also.
Impressed by the dramatic improvements that cannabis brought to Jean's quality of life, and denied access to the healing herb by a hypocritical medical and justice system, Jean and her husband Steve Marlowe became politically active.
It's been a real fight. I've started having rallies to educate people in 1995 on the Polk County Courthouse lawn. I wanted to educate people to the medical issue. FDA had just approved research for marijuana in AIDS-related cases, but they wouldn't provide any marijuana for the research. Neither would the DEA. And I thought, well, that was just terribly wrong, and I wanted people to be educated. So I started having rallies, and local authorities didn't particularly like it, and they told me not to do that anymore. And I just don't really take well to people telling me I can't exercise my rights to free speech and free assembly, so I did. And then when Social Security papers came, and they actually were documented, that says that I could not take these other medications and that I used marijuana, then I agreed to a news interview with a local TV station, in which I smoked marijuana in a water pipe that filters out any impurities or anything that could be in commercial marijuana, you know, to get the dirt and impurities out of it. And I smoked it through a water pipe. Said that, you know, 2 or 3 puffs was enough to be a dose for medicine, and then, you know, it would last you until you needed 2 or 3 more.
It affects her legs, back, and muscles. Pain and severe muscle spasms had her taking 6 different medications every day.
I couldn't remember from one day to the next what I did. I couldn't balance my checkbook. I couldn't function.
4 years ago, it was suggested she try marijuana to help alleviate pain and relieve spasms. She began smoking marijuana, stopped taking all prescription medications, and claims it's the only thing that works.
It helped so dramatically that I flushed all the pills down the commode. And I've relied on nothing since 1991.
Jean is listed as 95% disabled. This week, the Social Security Administration approved her use of marijuana under their experimental drug therapy policy. She is one of only a handful of people in the country who has the government seal of approval to smoke pot. She smokes the equivalent of 3 marijuana cigarettes per day.
And that 3 times is a dose of medicine, and it lasts about 3 hours.
So even though the government has okayed Mrs. Marlowe to use marijuana, finding a legal source of it is a different story. Most pharmacies will not carry it, and most doctors across the state will not prescribe it. So for the time being, she will continue to count on her illegal ways of obtaining the drug. In Polk County, Tracy Martin, News Channel 7.
And 3 days later, the authorities came in and arrested me and took me off to jail.
4-year-old Jean Marlowe was arrested and her marijuana confiscated. News Channel 7's Tracy Martin has the latest.
After searching the home of Steve and Jean Marlowe, the Polk County Sheriff's Department brought the couple in for questioning. Earlier this week, News Channel 7 reported that the 44-year-old woman had received the acknowledgement from the Social Security Administration that she could use marijuana to control pain. The okay from the government allows for prescription use of marijuana prescribed by a doctor who monitors the use as part of an experimental program. Criteria the sheriff's office doesn't feel has been met.
We executed a search warrant this morning. I can't tell you anything other. We haven't filed all the charges and everything yet. Be a while. Be a while.
But you think you may file charges?
Oh, sure. That's about all I can tell you.
Inside the couple's home, a small amount of marijuana, some marijuana plants, and items the sheriff's office calls drug paraphernalia were confiscated. In an interview earlier this week, Jean Marlowe says she uses marijuana to control pain. She suffers from a degenerative disease.
If I have no marijuana for as long as 2 days, I have muscle spasms so excruciating that I have to be taken to the emergency room and be given multiple shots to release the muscle spasms. This has happened on several occasions.
The matter of smoking marijuana legally as a form of medicine is new ground, and the Polk County law enforcement says they'll need a lot more clarification before this issue is dropped. In Polk County, Tracy Martin, News Channel 7.
Mrs. Marlowe is free from the Polk County Jail tonight. She plans to contact the American Civil Liberties Union to ask for legal advice.
It went to district court, and the district attorney didn't feel like it would serve any purpose to pursue the case, and he dismissed it. And I asked the judge for my property back. And they said, well, if I wasn't indicted within 30 days, I'd get it back. And so I went, after 31 days, I went to the sheriff's department to get my grow lights back, and they wouldn't let me have them. So I sued the sheriff's department for return of my personal property, and that really started a war.
By 1997, Jean Marlowe had founded the Grassroots Association for Medical Marijuana. and new activists around the country. She had heard about a farm in Switzerland called Switco that was sending medical-grade cannabis to patients in the U.S. They were acting under the belief that various UN treaties guaranteed the right of a patient to bring a 3-month supply of over-the-counter medications across the borders.
I had every legal right to import this medicine, especially since the United States government, in the Single Convention Treaty, they promise, the 21st sentence, they promise to make it available for their citizens, and they don't do it. So they shouldn't care that we make it available where it's safe and effective medicine for ourselves, and it's affordable.
As the local sheriff had still not honored the court order to return Jean's grow lights, she still had no source of clean and properly cured cannabis, so Jean took Switco up on its offer.
So I imported some medicine, and Customs found it, well, the National Guard found it, and turned it into Customs, and I was arrested for it. And now I'm facing federal prison time over it, because when I went to the federal jury, to a federal jury trial, the judge, federal judge in Statesville, his name was Judge Lacey Thornburg, denied me my constitutional right to a medical necessity defense. Wouldn't let me have any of the medical argument, wouldn't let me present any of my medical evidence, any of my medical testimony. So I was left with no defense.
It took the jury 15 minutes to convict Jean Marlowe on 3 counts: conspiracy to import marijuana, possession and distribution of marijuana, a charge that Jean herself incurred by admitting that she gave cannabis to other patients in need.
It left me basically devastated. If you look at my record now, I'm no different than a common criminal or some kind of drug dealer for having tried to ease my suffering the only way I knew how, in a way that I thought was legal, to where I wouldn't have to go to the black market to get an inferior, dirty product that I need for medicine. So I exercise my rights under the Constitution of the United States as a citizen, as a human being, entitled to human and civil rights. And I'm prosecuted like I'm just any drug dealer on the streets. That hurts me worse than anything, that they consider me a criminal for easing my pain. I don't understand this.
Switco sent many packages of medical marijuana all across America. U.S. Customs even admits seeing one package go to South Carolina the same day that Jean's package went to North Carolina. Yet Jean is the only patient who has been subjected to federal prosecution. Why did the federal government single Jean out? Was it her activism? Was it the way that she and her husband Steve educated their whole community and won over the local media? Did her successful lawsuit against the county for the return of her property cause the federal government to view her as a threat? More on that later. Jean Marlowe was convicted on June 8, 1998. She was informed that sentencing would be in 30 to 60 days, and that if she tested positive for cannabis, her bond would be revoked, and she would be jailed pending sentencing.
It kept going on and on and on, and by August, when I still hadn't been sentenced or was told they didn't have any idea, I began to get the idea that I was testing positive every time I was tested, every month, and I began to get the idea that I felt like that I was going to have to go to jail. I got a letter in October that my bond had been, I was going to a bond hearing. They were going to revoke my bond. And I went to a hearing on November the 9th.
In attendance at the bond hearing were 2 medical marijuana patients that received cannabis from the U.S. government. The government's Compassionate IND program, formed as a result of a lawsuit in 1978, at one time served as many as 14 patients. President George Bush closed the program in 1991 when thousands of AIDS patients applied. At present, only 8 remain on the program. Robert Randall, the original plaintiff in 1979, was present at the bond hearing. Though he did not get to speak, his presence and status was noted by the judge. Also, there was Elfie Musica, who controls her glaucoma with cannabis, legally.
Regardless of what the doctor said, the prosecution was determined. They had to see for themselves exactly what would happen. So they put me in jail.
The judge ruled that Jean would be held until sentencing at the Buncombe County Detention Facility in Asheville. He assured her family and friends that she would be provided adequate medical care. This was not to be the case.
But the truth is, they've had her for 2 days in a little hole, thrown up in a crack, not able to reach out her mouth. She's having severe back pain and trembles, and it's not right because the federal judge said they would monitor her regularly, take care of her health needs.
She was incarcerated and really was very uncomfortable for 3 or 4 days with nausea and vomiting and unable to eat. Certainly part of it of being upset of being incarcerated, but also not having available use of the cannabis.
After Jean's doctor visited the U.S. Marshal's office on November 12th, Jean Marlowe was moved that night. Her husband wouldn't know until the next morning that Jean had been moved to the Burke County Jail, 40 miles east of Asheville in Morganton.
Such a small matter as this, they have made into such a huge thing that they call it a drug war, and they lock people up every day and take them away from their families and their children. They're breaking up homes this way. Jean, in here, she has a daughter and she has a family, and we miss her, and home is not a home without her. And we just hope that somehow that people will stand up and shout out to the heavens that this is wrong and it can no longer go on in a country that's supposed to be free and believe in compassion and what's right.
Jean Marlowe's sentencing hearing was scheduled for November 24th. She was receiving better care at the Burke County facility, but her liver enzymes were rising and the liver itself was swelling.
Medical personnel at the local jail was persuaded to start Marlowe, which is a synthetic THC, which did, after a day or two, relieve symptoms and really made a significant difference so that she wasn't nauseated and was able to eat. One of the problems that's occurring is that, and this is known with Marlowe, that it has an effect on the function of the liver.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, who were following Jean's case with great interest, contacted Joe Bundy, a specialist in federal appellate law. He recognized the precedent-setting potential of Jean's situation and said he would be at the sentencing hearing. Medical marijuana activists and others concerned with basic human rights became worried about Jean's condition in jail. The constant pain, the muscle spasms, and liver trauma were bad enough from just 2 weeks. What if the federal government sentenced Jean to 8 months in prison? A real possibility.
Phone calls. They just kept coming in. They came from everywhere in the country. They just won't know who to call and call. We had people, a councilman from California calling, offering to let her come there to live and be protected there. The governor's office was saying, please don't have people call me, you're tying up the phone lines and shutting them down, and we can't do nothing, no way. But I really believe that we educated the governor's office, the DA's office, the congressman's office, because people called from all through this community and this state and all across this country. It was shocking at the phone calls I received, and I think many more called the officials that was involved in this case.
Federal District Judge Lacey Thornburg convened Jean Marlowe's sentencing hearing on November 24th, 1998 in Asheville, North Carolina.
When I was getting ready to be sentenced, the probation office decided that normally due to my medical condition, they would recommend a downward departure. But due to the fact that I continued to exercise my rights to free speech and advocate for the legalization of marijuana as a medicine, that they wouldn't do that. So not only was I being punished for trying to save my life with a natural nerve, I was being punished again by the probation office for exercising my rights to free speech.
Only after attorney Joe Bondi pointed out a possible misreading of the case law at Gene's trial concerning the medical necessity defense did the court pause to reconsider its position on departing downward from the federal sentencing guidelines. Asked for his recommendation, Federal District Attorney Jerry Miller said that his office was in favor of compassion, a word he'd undoubtedly heard many times in the previous days. Judge Thornburg did depart downward, sentencing Gene Marlowe to 6 months house arrest and 18 months probation with urine tests for marijuana. That issue would have to be dealt with later, but for now, Gene would get to go home to her family.
On the morning of November the 25th, the day after I got out of court with sentencing, my probation officer came at 9 a.m. to install an anklet monitor for my house arrest. When he came in the door, he smelled marijuana, and he asked if anyone had been smoking. Just so happened that Miss Elvie Musica was here. Elvie is patient number 3. She gets marijuana legally from the federal government. But she's also a very, very wonderful lady. She's taught me to be strong, to stand up and say what's right. And she's my hero anyway in this movement. She's a really great lady. And he told Miss Elvie that she had to leave, that she couldn't be here. And as we went upstairs for him to install my anklet, I proceeded to tell him that Elvie was my friend and that she was going to stay in my house and she would be here through Thanksgiving. And then on the morning after Thanksgiving, she would leave. But that she would not leave beforehand. And that she would use her medicine because the federal government gave it to her. And if he had any problems with that, then he should take it up with the federal government, but not with me. My paper said I could not be around any illegal marijuana. And Elvie's marijuana is not illegal. Elvie's marijuana is legal. So I wondered really how it made him feel, putting an anklet on my ankle for using marijuana to try to save my life, while Elvie is legal to smoke marijuana to save her eyesight.
On Thanksgiving Day, 1998, the Asheville Citizen-Times quoted the federal district attorney as saying that the time had come for compassion. And Gene Marlowe cooked a wonderful dinner for her very thankful friends and family.
Come and get it!
Gene Marlowe's conviction is currently on appeal. Normal's legal staff and her local attorney Brent Connor are already impressed with precedents set in this case.
Well, at the trial, Ms. Marlowe's counsel wanted to present a medical necessity defense. He was not allowed to, primarily because the judge determined in advance that there was no such thing as a necessity defense, a medical necessity defense. I think the case law shows that he's in error. And I think ultimately Gene will have an opportunity to present that defense. Two good things have happened in Miss Marlowe's case. One, she didn't go to jail, and there was every reason to believe that she was going to go to jail. Two, the judge allowed Miss Marlowe to continue government monies. She receives government monies for, I think, disability. And the judge originally in his order had ended that for her by law. And we made a request to the district court to strike that part of his judgment. And the judge again showed compassion for Mrs. Marlowe and allowed that motion.
Ironically, the Polk County Sheriff's Department, after defying a court order for 2 years, finally returned Gene Marlowe's grow lights in October of 1998, just before her sentencing for conspiracy to import marijuana. Gene should not have to have sought out her medicine in Switzerland. She and her caregiver Steve were growing all that she needed at a cost to no one until her growing equipment was confiscated.
I'm having to take a prescription drug called Marinol. This drug costs the state of North Carolina $723 every 20 days for these little pills. They just don't do the job that whole cannabis does. They do a little bit for the muscle spasms. They do help them not be so extensive. But they do a little bit for the nausea. But the thing of it is, whole cannabis, I can take 2 or 3 puffs and get what I need. These things, if I take them, I'm really confused. very forgetful. They're a little more intense than what you need.
At the present time, I have just recently had the third major of our enzymes, and they are gradually increasing so that it appears as though that she's getting some toxicity from the Marinol. I think this is a problem which can't go on indefinitely, and at the present time, both legally and medically, trying to decide what she can do about this. It seems apparent that she wasn't having this difficulty when she had the availability of cannabis and was smoking it with some regularity.
All Jean Marlowe was trying to do was to secure a source of clean, safe medicine, the only one that her body could use, cannabis in its whole natural form.
As we go on, and places are where it's being used, I think it will be very clearly documented that cannabis has advantages over other medications. I think the commercial situation with drug companies and so on brings up the whole issue of the relationship of pharmaceutical companies and medicine, and the role of cannabis in the relief of symptoms in our culture, and medically and otherwise.
Jean Marlowe has not only taken the federal government to task over unjust laws, but she has elevated the issue to one of basic human rights, the unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the constitutional right to equal treatment under the law, the natural right to self-determination, to be free from any establishment that exploits for greed and power.
So I proceeded to tell my probation officer that he had sworn an oath, put his hand on the Bible, and swore an oath to protect my constitutional rights, to uphold the Constitution, to uphold the rights of the citizens, and that he was more bound to protect my rights to equal protection and treatment under the law than he was to mind his boss man who told him to violate my rights in any way. And this is something that I think all probation officers need to understand. Every federal, state employee needs to understand. When you take an oath to do a job and uphold the Constitution, then you are duty-bound and sworn to protect the rights of the citizens first and foremost.
All we really want out of this year is common sense. We want Congressman Taylor, the drug czar, and all the people fighting us to look at my wife's situation and say, if this was my wife, if this was my child, and the doctor told me this is what it took to help her, would I be doing everything that I could to get help for my wife and child? And I think that any congressman, any human being in the country would say, if this is what the doctors said, and this did seem to help, and this did seem to be safer, then they'd be right there doing the same thing that I've done, my wife done, and friends of hers done in fighting for her right.
This country's founding fathers warned us that tyranny advances in small steps, and that it is our duty as citizens to be vigilant, to stand up for our rights, to demand adherence to the U.S. Constitution and its amendments. Not only is Jean fighting for her life and the lives of others, but she is fighting for the very soul of this nation.